Welcome to Yehoshua's Daf Yomi Shiur, where the Daf continues daily until the complete revelation of Mashiach ben David, Messiah, the son of David. Today we'll be studying Tractate Chullin, page 86a at the top of the page, with the words Lo mi baya ka'amar. We're in the middle of something, so for context, if you'd like, you can go back to the previous Amud and see what it's talking about. Previous page, that is 85a, and see what it's talking about. And of course, if you're doing the Daf daily, you're following along, then you're already in the subject. So here we are at the top of the page. Lo mi boya ka'amar, lo mi boya tsei nachor, de lav shchita hi klal, aval tsei tarov, ema shchita she'eno ru'ya shma shchita, v'liboy kisui kamash malon kidrabechia bar abba. The Gemara responds. Rav Dimi is speaking, utilizing the style of it is not necessary. That is, it is not necessary to teach, go out, tear loose, since it is obvious that this is not considered slaughter at all, and one is not required to cover the blood. But with regard to the instruction, go out and render the bird a treifa, I would say that an act of slaughter that is not fit to render the meat permitted is nevertheless considered an act of slaughter, and the blood of this bird should require covering. Therefore, Rav Dimi teaches us, in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Chia bar Abba in C85a, that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi holds with regard to the mitzvah of covering the blood, that an act of slaughter that is not fit to render the meat permitted is not considered an act of slaughter, and one is therefore not required to cover the blood of this bird. Uleman damatzei nachoir, my time elo matzei tov, chitema kosov shchita she'enu shma shchita, ma'amar Rabbi Rabba, amar Rabbi Yochanan, Ra'a Rabbi Devarav shel Rabbi Shimon b'chisvei hadam, usna'o b'lashon chachamim. The Gemara asks, and according to the one who says that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said to Rabbi Chia, go out and tear loose the windpipe and gullet. I don't understand that. I just have to stop right there for a comment. How can you even suggest to tear out the gullet and windpipe? That's tzar b'lechaim. You can't. Why did that not come up? Someone who rips out the windpipe. Can you imagine such a barbaric act of ripping out with your hands the windpipe of an animal and the gullet? Just try to imagine that. That's tzar b'lechaim. At the very least, I don't understand why that never came up. That shouldn't be done because of that. Why didn't that come up? Okay. Go out and tear loose the windpipe and the gullet. Are people connecting what they're reading, what's actually being suggested here? What is the reason that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi did not say go out and render the bird a treifa? Okay, render the bird a treifa, not a treifa. The person is ripping out a windpipe. I just remember a scene of Indiana Jones many years ago when in the Temple of Doom, when they sacrificed a dude, the priest ripped the dude's heart out. It kind of reminds me of that. He actually stuck his hand inside his chest and ripped his heart out, and was beating. That's what it reminds me of. They're suggesting to rip a bird's. Anyway, I understand a bird is not a human, but still, it's still balachayim, and there still is a mitzvah in the Torah, as a nevera, to give tsar to an animal. Okay. Go ahead and render the bird treifa, and if you would say the reason is because Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi holds that an act of slaughter that is not fit to render the meat permitted is considered an act of slaughter, and one would be required to cover the blood, this is untenable. As doesn't Rabbi Chia bar Abba say, Rabbi Yochanan says that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi saw as correct the statement of Rabbi Shimon, that an ineffective slaughter is not considered an act of slaughter with regard to the mitzvah of covering the blood, and taught it in the Mishnah here using the term the rabbis. Lo mi boya kamar, lo mi boya tzeitzra, shchita she'enu lo shchita, avot zei nechoil, Emo in Shchita loif min ha-Toire. Unchirasoi zo hi Shchitasoi. V'liboi kisoi kamash melon kasher tzivisicho. The Gemara responds, Ravin is speaking utilizing the style of it is not necessary. That is, it is not necessary to teach, go out and render the bird a treifa, since an act of slaughter that is not fit to render the meat permitted is not considered slaughter, and one would not be required to cover the blood of the bird. But with regard to the instruction, go out and tear loose the windpipe and gullet, I would say that the slaughter of a bird is not obligatory by Torah law to render it permitted for consumption. Consequently, the tearing loose of its windpipe and gullet is considered its slaughter. Hello, Tzar Bar L'chaim, hello, is considered its slaughter. And the blood of this bird should require covering. Therefore, Ravin teaches us that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi holds that the slaughter of a bird is obligatory by Torah law, as he himself derives from the verse, as I have commanded you, Deuteronomy 12:21. ומנפלי אביניבה בחתני ורבין בר אבא ואמר רבי אבן בר סבא משאלו בני הגוי לפסקו הזיקין והזבויס ורוחויס ורעמים לא יחמיץ ינום ולא ילוקה פשטנום ונסנו חכמים עיניהם ברבי חייא ובנו. The Gemara questions the very occurrence of the incident involving Rabbi Chia, and could moths have infested his flax? But doesn't Ravin bar Abba say, and some say Ravin bar Sheva says, from when the people of the exile ascended from Babylonia to Eretz Israel, there ceased to be meteors, earthquakes, storm winds, and thunder, and their wine did not sour, and their flax was not stricken with an infestation of moths. And the sages placed their eyes, meaning attributed these phenomena, to the merit of Rabbi Chia and his sons, who ascended from Babylonia? If so, how was Rabbi Chia's flax affected? Kimahan yezchutayu al madiru adiduhu lo. Kirav Yehuda merav b'chol yom v'yom bas kol yotzeis v'omeres. כל העולם כולו ניזון בשביל חנינא בני וחנינא בני דאילו בקו הרובין מערב Shabbos לערב Shabbos. The Gemara responds, when their merit is effective, it is effective for the rest of the world, but not for themselves. As this is in accordance with the statement Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav, as Rabbi Yehuda says that Rav says, each and every day a divine voice emerges and says, the entire world is sustained in the merit of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, my son. And yet for Chanina, my son, a cob of cherubs, a very small amount of inferior food is sufficient to sustain him from one Shabbos Eve to the next Shabbos Eve. Similarly, the merit of Rabbi Chia and his sons was effective for others but not for themselves. Very good. Interesting. Okay, next we're starting a new mission now. In the case of a deaf mute, an imbecile, or a minor, who slaughtered an undomesticated animal or a bird, and others saw them and ensured that the slaughter was properly performed, in which case the slaughter is valid, see 2a. One who oversaw the slaughter is obligated to cover the blood. If they slaughter the animals among themselves without supervision, one is exempt from the obligation to cover the blood. Rabbi Meir mati lishchoit achareihen v'chachom moisrim u'moidim she'im shochat she'enoi soifig asar boi. And likewise, with regard to the matter of slaughtering a mother and his offspring on the same day, a deaf, muted, imbecile, or a minor slaughtered an undomesticated mother animal, and others saw them. It is prohibited to slaughter its offspring after them. If they slaughtered the mother animal among themselves, or a mayor deems permitted to slaughter its offspring, after them, and the rabbis deem it prohibited. And the rabbis concede that if one slaughters the offspring thereafter, that he does not incur the 40 lashes, as it is possible the mother was not properly slaughtered. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Zog the Gemorre, zog the Heilige Gemorre, ay, 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 ay. Okay. Just have to do a little tribute there. And Gemorre. Rabbanon ma'ishno reishe lo pligi, u'ma'ishno seife de pligi. The Gemara asks, as for the rabbis, what is different about the first clause of the Mishnah that discusses the covering of blood, where they do not disagree with the statement that if a deaf, mute, and imbecile or a minor slaughtered an animal without supervision, one is exempt from the obligation to cover the blood, which indicates that the rabbis hold that such an act of slaughter is not considered an act of slaughter. And what is different about the latter clause of the Mishnah that discusses the prohibition against slaughtering the mother and its offspring on the same day, where they disagree with Rabbi Meir and hold that if a deaf, mute, and imbecile or a minor slaughtered a mother animal without supervision, one is prohibited to subsequently slaughter its offspring, indicating they hold that such an act of slaughter is in fact considered an act of slaughter. The Gemara responds, actually it is uncertain whether the slaughter is valid or not. With regard to the first clause, if we say one is obligated to cover the blood from an unsupervised slaughter, people might say this is because the slaughter performed by these people is improper, and they will come to eat meat from their slaughter, and it is in fact forbidden to eat from their slaughter. Therefore the rabbis did not require the covering of the blood. Seifanami came in the Kamri Rabbanon. The Gemara challenges, if so, then with regard to the latter clause of the Mishnah as well, since the rabbis say it's prohibited to slaughter the offspring of the mother after them, people might say this is because the slaughter performed by these people is proper, and they will come to eat meat from their slaughter. Seifa Amri, Yisra de lo komi boile, Reshanami Amri, Lenakeh Chatseroi, Utzorich. The Gemara rejects this with regard to the latter clause prohibiting the slaughter of the offspring will not cause people to conclude the unsupervised slaughter of the mother by disqualified people as was valid. Rather, they will say the reason the offspring is not slaughtered is because the owner does not need the meat. The Gemara asks, but with regard to the first clause as well, covering the blood will not lead one to conclude that the unsupervised slaughter was valid, as the people will say he is covering the blood because he needs to clean his courtyard of the blood. If so, let the rabbis deem one obligated to cover the blood. Shachad be'ashpo ma'ik le'meimal boli molech ma'ika le'meimal. The Gemara rejects this, but if a disqualified person slaughtered the animal in a garbage dump, what can be said to allow the covering of the blood? Obviously, people will not assume one covers the blood in order to clean a garbage dump. Similarly, if one comes to consult the court, what can be said? That is, if one sees from a distance that a disqualified person slaughtered an animal and the blood is uncovered, and he comes to consult the court with regard to the obligation to cover the blood, if the court tells him to cover the blood, he might conclude that this is because the unsupervised slaughter was valid. Accordingly, since there are scenarios in which one might mistakenly conclude that the unsupervised slaughter of inept people is valid, the rabbis concede that one is exempt from covering the blood of such an act of slaughter in all cases. The Gemara asks, but according to your reasoning that the rabbis are concerned for the aforementioned scenarios, and with regard to the latter clause as well, if one comes to consult the court with regard to the slaughter of the offspring, what can be said? That is, if one sees a disqualified person slaughter the mother, and he comes to ask the court whether he may slaughter the offspring on the same day, if the court prohibits him from slaughtering it, he might conclude that this is because the slaughter of the mother was valid. Why then do the rabbis prohibit one from slaughtering the offspring? The Gemara concludes, rather, it must be that the rabbis disagree concerning the entire matter, meaning they disagree with regard to covering the blood as well, and hold that if a disqualified person slaughtered an animal while unsupervised, one must cover the blood. And the rabbis waited for Rabbi Meir until he concluded his statement, and then they disagree with him on both accounts. The Gemara asks, if so, granted the opinion of the rabbis is understandable, as they consistently rule stringently, that is, although it is prohibited to consume the meat of an unsupervised slaughter performed by a deaf mute, an imbecile, or a minor, the rabbis require one to cover the blood and prohibit one to slaughter the offspring due to concern that the person may have performed the valid slaughter. But with regard to the opinion of Rabbi Meir, that one is exempt from covering the blood and one may slaughter the offspring on the same day, what is the reason he does not rule stringently due to uncertainty? Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Michayev hoy Rabbi Meir al chitosam mishum nevelo, my taimon. Amar Rabbi Ami, hoil v'hoy masei mikul koli. Rabbi Yaakov says, Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Meir would deem one liable to receive lashes for eating from the slaughter of a deaf mute, an imbecile, or a minor due to violation of the prohibition against eating from an animal carcass. According to Rabbi Meir, there is no uncertainty with regard to such slaughter, and it is not considered an act of slaughter at all. Consequently, one may become liable to receive lashes for its consumption. The Gemara asks, what is the reason? Rabbi Ami says, since the majority of actions of a deaf mute, imbecile, and a minor are bungled, I guess, meaning they are performed incompetently, it can be assumed that their slaughter was performed improperly as well. Amar Rav Papa le Rav Huna brei Rav Yehoshua. Amri le Rav Huna brei Rav Yehoshua le Rav Papa. My iri aroiv. Afilu miud nami. Rabbi Meir chayash lemeutas. Moich miud l'chazoke. Bitra le'ruba. Rav Papa said to Rav Huna, the son of Rabbi Yehoshua, and some say that it was Rav Huna that said to Rabbi Yehoshua, said to Rav Papa. Some say that it was Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehoshua, said to Rav Papa. Okay, so some say it was Rav Papa said to Rav Huna, the son of Yehoshua, and some say that it was Rav Huna, the son of Rabbi Yehoshua, said to Rav Papa. Okay, why did Rabbi Ami specifically state that the reasoning of Rabbi Meir is based on the assumption that the majority of the actions are bungled, even if only a minority of their actions are bungled and the majority are performed competently? Rabbi Meir would also maintain that the animal is considered a carcass, as Rabbi Meir is concerned for minority when it can be combined with the presumptive status. If so, append the minority to the presumptive status of an animal prior to its slaughter, meaning that it is prohibited for consumption, and the majority of competent acts of slaughter is thereby weakened. Okay? Ditnan. For we learned in the Mishnah in Taros 3:8, Tinok shenimsa b'tzad ha'isub osek b'yodoi, Rabbi Meir mitay v'chachomim mitamin, b'pnei shedaka shu tinok letapech, v'yamrinan my time in Rabbi Meir, kosova roiv tinoko es mitapchin umiut, ein mitapchin v'isa zo b'cheskas tairas omedes. Okay, The Gemara proves that Rabbi Meir is concerned for the minority. As we learned in the Mishnah in Taharot 3a, in the case of a ritually impure child who is found alongside ritually pure started dough, and he has risen dough in his hand that may have been removed from the larger portion of started dough, Rabbi Meir deems the started dough pure. This is because there is no proof the child touched it. He might have given the piece by someone else, and the rabbis deemed it impure as they assumed that he touched the started dough. The child is presumed to be impure because it is the manner of a child to handle items. And we say, with regard to this Mishnah, what is the reasoning of Rabbi Meir? He holds that a majority of children handle items. In this case, the dough that are within reach, and a minority do not handle items within reach. And the dough itself retains a presumptive status of purity since its impurity has not been definitively determined. Interesting. All right, let's continue. Since we're in the middle of an idea, let's continue to 86b. 86b. One appends the minority of children who do not handle items within reach to the presumptive status of purity of the dough, and consequently the force of the majority of children who handle items within reach is weak, and therefore the dough is considered pure. Similarly, with regard to slaughter performed by inept people, why does Rabbi Ami state that the reason behind Rabbi Meir's opinion is due to a majority? Let even a minority of bungled acts of slaughter join with the presumptive prohibited status of the animal to render this animal a carcass. Okay. Okay, one more line. Im amru safek tuma l'taher, yom safek yisur la'atir. The Gemara responds that two cases are not comparable. If they said one may append the minority to the presumptive status with regard to a case of uncertain ritual impurity in order to render the dough pure, will they say that one may rely on a minority in the case of an uncertain prohibition in order to permit it? In other words, without the fact that a majority of the acts of slaughter of a deaf-mute, an imbecile, or a minor are bungled, Rabbi Meir could neither deem one exempt from covering the blood nor allow one to slaughter the offspring immediately. Consequently, it is due only to the majority that Rabbi Meir deems one liable for violation of the prohibition against consuming an animal carcass when consuming the meat for slaughter. Okay, we'll stop here. Continue on the next Amud.